Hey guys, tonight we plunge headfirst into a journey that's greasy, sacred, a little sleep deprived, and frankly, quite weird. Imagine biting into a medieval apple fritter at dusk, its cinnamon smeared crust still sizzling from a pan that's never quite clean. Or drifting to sleep in an Egyptian temple, waiting for a crocodile dodd to drop dream revelations into your semi-delirious brain. These are the flavors, rituals, and oddities we'll uncover tonight, from junk food fit for fairs to dreams inked into stone tablets. You start the evening in a narrow, loud lane somewhere in 14th century London. The cobblestones are slick with oil and refuse. A pig snuffles nearby for dropped fritter scraps, and you're peering past a smoke-haloed cart to grab a twist of battered sweetness, the apple fritter. Not the golden, photo-ready kind you might get at a modern fair. This one's misshapen, speckled with lard, and so chewy it could survive a siege. The apples sliced thin, fried hard, and barely tender, smeared with a sugar glaze if you're noble, or drizzled with honey diluted by someone's grandma's tears if you're not. Next up, fried cheese curds. They're not Wisconsin proud. They're medieval desperate. You pop a few into your mouth, their tangy, salty zap cutting through the grime of the city's open sewer aroma. These curds are mostly sheep milk, slightly sour and definitely bacterial, but hot, gooey, and crisp, they were comfort food in a world where comfort was mostly illegal. They'd be sold by toothless old women squatting behind firepots, throwing side-eyes at guards patrolling for unauthorized snacks. Medieval junk food wasn't packaged or mass-produced, but it was as seductive and bad for you as anything in a vending machine. Now your fingers are greasy. You wipe them on your tunic and keep walking. Past a clotted crowd and an alley echoing with lute music played poorly, you encounter fritter cousins, pastries filled with dates, nuts, and mashed figs. If you're lucky, the fruit hasn't fermented into something hallucinogenic. These small bites, wrapped in dough, fried in suet or pig fat, were beloved at fairs, events that smelled like wet horses and ambition. And they weren't cheap. A decent fritter could cost a peasant his dinner wages. But once a month, when the market opened and street entertainers juggled turnips, fritters felt worth it. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of fried foods in fairs stemmed from their portability or simply the medieval fascination with dangerous heat near crowds. Fires were frequent. So were greasy fingers reaching into communal bowls. You once again find yourself clutching something unidentifiable, round, fried, spicy. Maybe it's a fruit fritter, maybe a pigeon. You don't ask, you chew. It's warm, and you're still hungry. Your final bite this evening is the poor man's pie. Stale bread hollowed and stuffed with lard, salted onion bits, and a dicey chunk of mystery meat. It's street food born from hardship. You finish it under a flickering torchlight as a bard sings off-key about a saint who died from eating spoiled eel. Fitting, considering your dinner. Quirky fact, some fritter stalls used dried nettles in batter to add bulk and allegedly ward off meat demons. The taste was vegetable and astringent, but hey, demon-free is nice. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing who's sharing this strange little corner of history with me. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You chew thoughtfully as you wander toward the grimier corners of town, no less lively, just more intestinal. Beneath a canopy made of stitched goat bladders, you're handed a skewer that jiggles unpleasantly. Blood pudding balls. Yes, they're exactly what they sound like. Coagulated animal blood whipped with oats, onions, and a dash of stale spice, shaped into dense spheres and fried until the outside crunches, but the inside stays loose. You try one. It tastes like meat's shadow, iron-heavy and strangely sweet. Not bad, if you ignore its origin story. This isn't a delicacy, though some nobles pretended it was when budgets ran low. It's poverty cuisine at its resourceful finest. Medieval kitchens didn't waste anything. Organs, clots, snouts, and blood pudding was often the last stop before the butcher scraped out the trough. You, squinting into the dusk, chew and wonder how long that stall's been using the same oil. Probably since last Easter. Next up, grit cakes. Not a typo. These are cakes made of ground grain, moss, and maybe a pinch of black pepper if the vendor's feeling fancy. You take one, and it crumbles like a guilty conscience, bland, starchy, slightly smoky, like a cracker that went camping. These were the go-to for those without access to wheat, which in medieval terms meant anyone not currently married to a baron. Here's where things get chewy. Grit cakes weren't just peasant filler. They were survival tokens, stored in clay jars, stuffed into saddlebags, and sometimes traded for sick goats. Fringe fact: some grit cake recipes added chalk for texture and moral fiber, because nothing says character like indigestion. You step over a puddle of something historically vague and spot a boy hawking grease nibbles, little fried lumps of suet rolled in bran and mystery herbs. They resemble modern hush puppies, if those hush puppies spent a weekend in a dungeon. The boy swears they're good for your humors. You're skeptical, but nibble anyway. Historians still argue whether these grease-based snacks were technically food or just edible ritual. Some suggest they were sold primarily around holy days to break fasts in the most ironic way possible. Others think they were the medieval version of bar snacks, cheap, salty, and designed to pair with ale that doubled as mild poison. You pause beside a stained wooden table where a toothless man offers bog biscuits, flattened cakes made with bog water and barley husk. They taste earthy, too earthy. You imagine choking on moss and sadness. Yet these snacks, absurd as they seem now, reveal a critical truth. Food wasn't just sustenance. It was identity. Your grit cake marked you as poor. Your blood pudding said you were practical. Your bog biscuit proved you'd lost a bet. And then you smell it. Something fishy. Something fried. Something slippery. You'll chase it in the next section. Eels waiting. You follow the smell. It's wet, fishy, and unmistakably medieval. The market narrows into a crooked alley, and there, frying atop cracked tiles, is the star of questionable river cuisine: eel. Curled, sizzled, slick with tallow, This isn't sushi-grade elegance. This is working-class survival wrapped in snake-shaped protein. You're handed a stick impaling 2 hunks of fried eel, barely marinated and vaguely twitchy. You bite. The texture's gelatinous, like someone tried to roast jelly. And the taste? Mud forward with a hint of, should this still be moving? The vendor, grinning through gaps in his dental resume, explains that eels were preserved using 3 main techniques: salt, smoke, and sheer recklessness. Without refrigeration, medieval fishmongers relied on salt so heavy it could pickle your dreams. Whole barrels of eel were layered with coarse, imported salt, precious stuff, often taxed or traded like treasure. Smoking was next. Long hours over peat fires, which gave the eel pungent, mossy flavor and left you smelling like burnt swamp for days. Less commonly, eels were pickled in wine and herbs, but only nobles enjoyed such refinement. The rest got brine and mold. Now, fun fact, eels were so popular in parts of England that some monasteries tracked yearly eel consumption in elaborate ledgers. One abbey recorded over 50,000 eels eaten in a single Lent season. Historians still argue whether this constituted gluttony or was just holy snacking. You chew slower now. The market buzzes around you, vendors shouting through fog, cats leaping for dropped fish heads, a monk preaching moderation beside a cart selling candied eel tails. Candied. In honey, naturally, the medieval sweetener of choice, unless you were rich enough for sugar. A fringe treat catches your eye next. Eel pops. Small fried eel bits, speared like candied apples, rolled in stale breadcrumbs and nut powder. They crunch, then squelch. You're not sure if it's innovative or terrifying. Both. By now, you've noticed something. These foods are high effort, low reward. Frying eel in lard, coating it in whatever's not dirt, and serving it with scraps, all to make it palatable. But still, people loved it. Eel fed entire villages. It was cheap, readily available, and didn't require butchery. It slithered, it wriggled, and sometimes, rarely, it tasted okay. You step back from the stall and notice the fishmonger's hands, calloused, stained with scales and salt, trembling from cold. These foods weren't just meals. They were livelihoods, snacks born from swamp rivers, and resilience. Your stomach mutters something that might be regret. You wrap the last eel chunk in a bit of cloth, maybe a snack for later. You decide against it. In the distance, something sparkles. A noble's cart with tiny gold pots. Sugar glistens. You're moving up in culinary class next. Just don't expect to taste it.
You edge closer to the noble cart, drawn by white ponies with braided manes and drivers dressed like fancy napkins. The cart itself glitters, gold trim, silk curtains, and under one dome-shaped lid, sugar. Real sugar. Imported from far-off lands, harvested by hands you'll never meet, and costly enough to shame a bishop. A slender noblewoman lifts a silver spoon, drizzling crystallized sugar over a warm apple fritter. Yes, the same one you gnawed earlier while dodging a pig. Her version gleams, yours dripped. She smiles and bites daintily. You remember choking slightly and blowing crumbs onto your tunic. Sugar was wildly expensive in medieval Europe, mostly reserved for elite sweet tooths and priests who knew the right merchants. Commoners? They got honey. Not golden, pasteurized, bear-shaped bottle honey, but raw honey, unfiltered, often gritty, usually harvested from wooden hives hidden behind monasteries. It crystallized quickly and sometimes came with bonus bee legs. You wander behind the noble cart, where vendors sell knockoff fritters covered in sweet glaze. Really, just boiled tree sap mixed with vinegar and hope. It's technically sweet. You try a bite. It sticks to your molars like betrayal. The vendor winks and whispers, "Royal taste, peasant price." Even among the lower classes, honey wasn't always a guarantee. Those even poorer? Yes, it's possible, used boiled beet syrup or birch sap, and some even roasted tree bark for a vaguely sweet powder. Fringe fact, a few medieval recipes included crushed dried peas mixed with berries to mimic sugar texture. It worked, kind of, if you didn't mind dessert that tasted like soup. Historians still argue whether sugar's rise led directly to dental disasters among the nobility. Portraits from the time show surprisingly good teeth, but they're mostly artistic lies. A few royal memoirs mention the ache behind my cheek, and scholars suspect this was code for rot. You press further into the fair, where tooth decay isn't the only risk. Candy vendors, yes, they exist, sell candied flower petals and spiced nuts coated in honey. Children gather like moths. You grab a candied rose. It's chewy, floral, and unexpectedly spicy. You chew and sneeze. A young girl giggles and offers you candied parsley, claiming it prevents nightmares. You take it. You're still skeptical. The divide between honey and sugar in medieval society mirrors the gap between rich and poor. Where nobles saw indulgence, commoners saw medicine, ritual, and rare celebration. Honey was used in salves, in offerings, and in pies you'd only make once a year. You're getting full now, not just physically, but historically. Sweetness carried meaning. It drew lines in the mud between privilege and survival. And that fritter, the one drizzled with sugar and eaten like a love letter, that was status. A shout interrupts your thoughts. A fair barker screams, "Spice bread and fried dreams." Your next stop's about to smell amazing.
The smell hits you before the sound does. Nutmeg, clove, and something gloriously fried. Then the fair barker's voice bellows again. "Spice bread and fried dreams!" You follow the crowd as it thickens, brushing past a juggler flipping wooden sausages and a mime trapped inside an imaginary chicken coop. Soon you're standing before a stall wreathed in steam and spice.
Flatbreads sizzle atop a slab of iron, each piece puffed with uneven air pockets and flecked with bits of dried fruit. The vendor grins, revealing 3 teeth, and hands you a piece wrapped in a cabbage leaf. You bite into warm heaven, flour, oil, and cinnamon that hits like a medieval sugar rush. This is fried bread, seasoned with whatever your region could afford. Nutmeg from trade ships, ground peppercorn, or in your case, crushed juniper and something suspiciously floral. These breads were fair food royalty, often eaten with clotted cream or dipped in ale. They weren't everyday snacks. You had to wait for feast days, market openings, or weddings between people who didn't particularly like each other. You chew, the texture soft, then crisp. It's street food, but with spices that crossed oceans. Spices in medieval Europe were exotic, rare, and occasionally mythologized. Cloves were said to cure melancholy. Cinnamon could raise the dead. Maybe. Historians still argue whether the average medieval villager truly knew the source of their spices, or just assumed they came from magical goats in distant mountains. Either way, spice stalls sold dreams. You walk past a troupe performing medieval slapstick, one actor dressed as a spoiled apple, the other a frying pan. They reenact the Great Fritter Fire of Kent, an event you suspect was mostly apocryphal, but delightfully greasy. Then a child tugs your sleeve, offering fried bread with lucky clove. You try it. The clove makes your tongue tingle and the bread fizzle with unexpected warmth. It's not just food, it's performance art. Some fair vendors mixed spices based on astrological charts. You eat like a Sagittarius, or maybe a confused Capricorn. Behind another stall, fried cheese reappears, now dusted with powdered ginger and served with sweet onion mash. You bite, and it's bliss. The spices cut through the grease and leave you dreaming of noble banquets you'll never attend. Fringe fact: one fair recipe combined fried bread, dried fish, and crushed licorice root. It was called Knight's Breath. The name was ironic. As the fair winds down, spice carts close and a whisper spreads, something about dream ale at the monastery's edge. But before beer, you take one last bite of fried dough, dusted in what the vendor swears is dragon spice. Tastes like pepper. You believe him anyway. Your belly's warm, your fingers sticky. The fair fades behind you. The monks are waiting, and so is the ale that shaped empires. You stumble past the spice-scented fare into a dim cloister where the air shifts, cooler, heavier. A monk waves you in, holding a clay mug that glistens with frothy, beige liquid. Medieval beer. Not the kind with citrus notes and clever cans. This one's thick, cloudy, chewy, yes, chewy, and possibly alive. You sip. It tastes like sour bread dunked in warm rain. But it's nourishing, surprisingly filling. That's because medieval beer was often made without hops, especially in early brewing. Instead, Groot, a mix of herbs like yarrow, wild rosemary, and bog myrtle, gave it flavor and mild psychoactive punch. Your eyelid twitches. You choose to ignore it. Beer wasn't recreation. It was food. It packed calories, hydration, sort of,
and nutrients. Even children drank small beer, a low-alcohol version safer than well water. The boiling process killed most bacteria. So yes, chugging medieval ale was technically health-conscious. Just ignore the occasional hallucination. You sit on a barrel as the monk recounts ale's role in dispute settlement. Bartered land? Confirm it over ale. Marriage negotiations? Let's toast. Church repairs? Ale fundraiser. Fringe fact: one abbey brewed so much that its beer production doubled its oat harvest. Historians still argue whether the brewery was technically part of their spiritual mission or just a divine loophole. The monk then explains beer's social power. Brewing rights were controlled by guilds, feudal lords, and surprisingly often, women. In many villages, alewives ran local production, wielding influence over both hydration and gossip. You picture a stern woman stirring a cauldron while eavesdropping on four barons. She nods. She knows. A side table displays bizarre brews, one made from fermented peas and one laced with chicken bones for fortitude. You're skeptical. The monk winks and pours another round of barley-based liquid with hints of bread crust and regret. You take a sip, your tongue numbs slightly. Ale was survival. It fed towns, built alliances, and filled gaps where food ran short. You toast your clay mug and breathe in the aroma, wet wood, yeast, and faint hope. It's not delicious, but it's honest. From beer's body to dream's mystery, you're about to lie down inside an ancient temple. Crocodile dung optional.
You lie on a stone slab in an Egyptian temple that smells of frankincense, damp reed mats, and, yes, crocodile dung. It's not punishment. It's tradition. You're part of a dream incubation ritual, hoping the gods will whisper secrets through your sleep. The priest dabs your forehead with scented oil, likely derived from lotus flowers and ambiguous herbs, though you catch an unmistakable whiff of something swampy. Crocodile dung was sometimes used as symbolic protection. You blink. You're still awake. The temple's walls glow with torchlight, flickering over carved glyphs that recount dream prophecies, healing visions, and royal nightmares. Above you looms Sobek, the crocodile-headed god of fertility and strength, and, apparently, dreams. The theory goes, if Sobek swims through your sleep, it means fertility, prosperity, or a really weird breakfast craving. Ancient Egyptians believed dreams were divine telegrams, not subconscious musings, not stress responses, but full-blown messages from gods, ancestors, and sometimes irritated demons. To prepare, you fasted, bathed in sacred water, and smeared yourself in perfumes strong enough to stun a camel. You're currently drowsy. The oil on your forehead tingles. Nearby, a priest chants softly, while a scribe prepares your dream journal. Yes, journals. Egyptians documented their dreams with obsessive precision. Dreamt of dancing hippo. Good harvest. Dreamt of falling feathers. bad marriage. Every image meant something. Entire schools of interpretation existed, rivaling modern psychiatry with more birds. Fringe fact: certain priests specialized solely in dreams. They were paid to sleep, dream, and report back. If their dreams didn't align with temple prophecies, they got benched. Historians still argue whether these rituals were medical, mystical, or bureaucratic. Some view them as spiritual diagnostics. Others see ancient Egypt's early attempt at sleep therapy, minus the melatonin. The floor beneath you shifts subtly. Is it the dream beginning, or the temple's shifting foundation? You close your eyes and wait. In the silence, you imagine scorpions dancing, rivers whispering your name, and gods carving riddles into your skull. You hope it's a metaphor. You wake from your temple night slightly dazed, unsure if the crocodile head in your dream was divine prophecy or digestive protest. The priest hands you a wax tablet, your dream record. The symbols etched are cryptic: feather, goat, 3 squiggly lines. Very favorable, he assures you. You nod, but the goat looked suspiciously judgmental. Dream interpretation wasn't just temple drama. It became a scholarly discipline spanning Mesopotamia, Egypt, Greece, and Rome. You leave the temple and wander through time into a Babylonian scriptorium. Here, priests compile vast manuals filled with dream symbols, each a key to future plagues, harvests, betrayals, or awkward family dinners. One popular compilation, the Ishkar Zakik, documents hundreds of dream types. Dreamt of floodwaters? Good omen. Dreamt of crying bread? Bad marriage. The specificity is startling. You flip a clay tablet and discover a passage that links scorpions in dreams to unexpected visitors, possibly your mother-in-law or an invading army. Historians still argue whether these texts were viewed as spiritual guides or ancient stand-up routines gone solemn. Next, you wander into a Greek agora, where dream interpreters ply their trade like psychics, crossed with weather forecasters. One offers a scroll filled with nightly advice. Dream of trees? Prosperity. Dream of falling? New sandals. You blank. That doesn't feel connected. The Greeks elevated dream analysis further, linking it with the soul's journey. Aristotle saw dreams as biological echoes, while Plato mulled their role in revealing higher truth. You drink fig wine and argue with a philosopher who claims nightmares are just poor digestion. You disagree. Your last dream featured an eel doing taxes. Fun fringe fact: some dream interpreters believed the moon's phase altered dream content. Waxing moon equals romance. Waning moon equals plumbing disasters. You begin tracking your dreams by lunar charts. Soon they resemble abstract poetry. You end this stroll beside a Roman patrician, whispering about her dream of being chased by sheep. She's unsure if it means rebellion or laundry. You nod sagely and say, "Definitely laundry." Your dream journal grows, filled with riddles and symbolic noodles. You're almost ready to sleep again, this time under Greek stars, hoping dreams will guide your next step, or just let you nap without goats.
You leave the Roman street behind and wandered toward a grove outside Athens. Olive trees swaying, moonlight slinking through mist. A small shrine stands there, barely more than a carved stone slab and a thatched roof supported by columns that look like they've seen better prayers. This is an incubation chamber, where you'll spend the night invoking divine insight through dreams. You lie on a straw mat that smells like thyme and goat. Someone sprinkles rose water nearby. You sneeze. It's poetic. In ancient Greece, dream incubation wasn't just mysticism. It was therapy, religion, and sometimes last-ditch medicine. You're told to sleep facing east, a direction favored by Apollo, the dream sender-in-chief. You're skeptical, but the mat's lumpy and east is less windy. Beneath you, carved into stone, are glyphs detailing past dreams from other pilgrims. One saw a lion baking bread, good omen. Another floated over cornfields, harvest guaranteed. And one just screamed about turnips, undecided. Before sleep, a priest teaches you the proper chant, soft, rhythmic, like a lullaby hummed by philosophy majors. The air fills with scent, lavender, burnt resin, and fainted sheep. You close your eyes. Around you, others murmur prayers, clutch talismans, or wear odd headbands made from olive bark and regret. And then, the dream. You're climbing a staircase made of vowels. A toga-wearing turtle speaks in riddles. There's a honey pot shaped like your uncle. You wake suddenly. The priest nods solemnly and whispers, "This means you must take a journey." You wonder if it's metaphorical or just commentary on the turtle. Fringe fact: the ancient Greek Asclepion temples, devoted to healing and dreams, were basically spiritual sleep clinics. Pilgrims fasted, prayed, and slept, sometimes for days, hoping to dream cures for ailments. Some even reported divine surgeries during slumber. Historians still argue whether these visions were spiritual encounters or the result of sleep deprivation and too much fermented lentil wine. By morning, you've scrawled your vision into a wax tablet. The priest adds it to the collective log. Somewhere an interpreter will cross-reference your turtle with last week's dolphin and declare you mildly prophetic. You stretch and step out into sunlight. The dreams linger, abstract and sticky. But now it's time to mount a horse and sprint into a wild, dusty corner of American history. You snap back into the dust-laced 19th century American plains as hoofbeats thunder beneath you. You're astride a sleek pony, barely 14 hands high, built for speed, not comfort, and clutching a leather pouch that holds 20 letters sealed with hope, tax arguments, and declarations of love written in ink that's already smudging. Welcome to the Pony Express. Your mount is jittery. The landscape blurs past. scrub brush, rattling fences, and the occasional prairie dog giving side eye. You're one of the riders, a wiry teen, paid well but replaceable, dashing through heat and hail, carrying news faster than any steamboat or stagecoach. The trail stretches from Missouri to California, 1,900 miles stitched together by outposts, switch horses, and pure adrenaline. At this exact moment, your job is survival. You dodge a tumbleweed the size of emotional trauma, squint at the horizon for station smoke signals, and ignore the revolver on your belt because you're not technically allowed to use it unless wolves get personal. Riders were expected to cover up to 100 miles a day, changing horses every 10 to 15 miles. No time for breaks, no room for mistakes. Fringe fact, the Pony Express recruited orphaned teens partly because they were lighter and less likely to be missed. Yes, history was pragmatic and slightly unsettling. The satchel tied to your waist contains time-sensitive mail, tax forms, legal papers, coded telegrams, and sometimes just heartfelt scribbles from someone who still believed in westward dreams. One letter reads, "My dearest Abigail, if your goose survived, then so shall our love." You hope the goose made it. Historians still argue whether the Express truly revolutionized communication or merely filled a brief logistical gap until the telegraph arrived. Operational for only 18 months, it nonetheless became legend, partly because its riders faced everything: bandits, blizzards, angry bison, and one reported case of rabid raccoon interference. You lean low as your pony charges uphill, nostrils flaring like tiny steam engines. Wind whips past. A hawk screeches overhead, maybe patriotic, maybe judgmental. You reach a relay station just as dusk hits, switch mounts, gulp thick coffee that could revive a mummy, and gallop on. The message must get through, and you, one of history's most glorified mailmen, are committed. Next stop, a mixed-up letter, a faulty relay, and a very awkward diplomatic moment.
You slow your pony to a trot as dust thickens and the sky bruises with the threat of rain. The next relay station looms ahead, a crooked cabin with a tilted flag and two horses tethered like they've just had an argument. Inside, a mustachioed clerk is squinting at ledgers, hiccuping into a tin cup of stale root beer, and entirely unaware that he's about to misroute 3 critical documents and possibly spark a minor diplomatic disaster. You dismount, hand off your pouch, and brace for confusion. The clerk frowns at your satchel and mutters, "Why are these envelopes sealed with goat wax?" You shrug. A man in Nebraska insists it preserves integrity. He then proceeds to file your letters into the wrong saddlebags. One destined for Denver ends up heading east. Another, addressed to the governor of California, is stuffed behind a crate of beans. And the third, it's a wedding invitation, now marked urgent military. These mix-ups happened often. With dozens of relay stations across a vast, mostly unmapped terrain, the Pony Express relied on handwritten logs, verbal handovers, and crossed fingers. If a clerk couldn't read cursive or had a lingering hangover, the results were chaotic. Mail went missing, deliveries duplicated, and one famous report involved a writer delivering 5 copies of the same letter to the same person, each with increasingly frantic footnotes. Fringe fact, one relay station doubled as a taxidermy shop and claimed they could preserve your letter and your raccoon. Both came slightly crunchy. Historians still argue whether these relay blunders hindered the Express's legacy or simply added flavor to its mythology. The margin for error was massive, yet the sheer speed and courage of the riders kept public faith alive, even when grandmothers received legal summons meant for generals. You leave the station just as another clerk tries to decipher a coded message written in Pig Latin. A rider saddles up with a bundle of unrelated items, 3 letters, a bottle of gin, and a pair of gloves labeled "From Aunt Clara." You nod respectfully. Every mail item is sacred, even when it's confusing. As you mount your next pony, thunder cracks. You clutch your satchel tighter. It contains letters that may or may not be misfiled, but they're moving forward. That's what matters. The stories grow wild from here because the Pony Express wasn't just a service. It became a legend.
You ride on into myth. The trail beneath you feels less like dirt now, more like memory stitched across prairie and legend. You're galloping toward a relay station known mostly in song and rumor, where riders supposedly leapt from rooftop to saddle, and one famously outran his own horse. The Pony Express, once raw logistics, is morphing into folklore as fast as the telegraph creeps closer. At a saloon in Kansas, you overhear a bearded man retelling a tale of Lightning Lou, who delivered 15 letters during a blizzard while surviving solely on jerky and rage. You nod politely. In truth, no rider ever officially clocked rage as a survival metric, but it's a good story. The Express was short-lived, April 1860 to October 1861. That's it. Barely a blink in history. But its cultural echo? Thunderous. Paintings of proud riders with windswept hair and chiseled optimism filled parlor walls. Dime novels dramatized riders dodging arrows, bears, and poorly timed romance. You flick through one such booklet. It features a rider named Buck Flame, who apparently married 3 women during one relay. Artistic license. Historians still argue whether the media's obsession with the Express distorted its reality or honored its courage. Fact: riders were mostly teenagers, paid about $100 a month, and discouraged from carrying weapons. Fiction: they could single-handedly outpace trains. Truth lived somewhere in between, on muddy boots, scratched letters, and aching horses. You pass a roadside monument, a bronze statue of a rider, muscles rippling, hair sculpted like dramatic wheat. You smirk. Your own hair is plastered to your forehead with sweat and last night's fried bread. Fringe fact: one opera in the early 20th century centered around a Pony Express love triangle involving a runaway bride, a stolen map, and an emotionally gifted mule. It ran for 3 performances and was never spoken of again. As your pony slows, you wonder how the Express, with its ephemeral lifespan and brutal pace, came to symbolize American grit. Maybe it's the sheer romance of speed, letters crossing untamed wilderness, and young riders chasing sunsets with nothing but courage and a slightly jammed revolver. You dismount and pat your pony's neck. The legend gallops on, even as the telegraph poles rise like wooden obituaries. But before wires strangled the wild, it was all hoofbeats and hope, which feels a lot like ancient beer, come to think of it.
You squint against the Sumerian sun, its sharp heat bouncing off mud brick walls and drying the air until even your shadow feels thirsty. Before you stands a temple brewery, not a pub, not a tavern, but a sacred site where barley meets divinity. The air smells of toasted grain, fermenting mash, and the faint perfume of offerings, myrrh, rosewater, and one burnt locust someone misread as symbolic. A priestess beckons you with a clay goblet foaming lightly at the brim. This is not casual beer, it's liquid devotion. Sumerians didn't just drink beer, they revered it. Each batch brewed here honors the goddess of beer and fermentation. Her hymn still echoes in cuneiform tablets, an ode detailing ingredients, steps, and spiritual intent. You take a sip. It's warm, thick, and textured like oatmeal that got philosophical. This beer isn't filtered. It's chewed or sipped through straws designed to avoid the grainy sludge. The priestess smiles knowingly. You choke slightly and fake a cough to cover it. She hands you dates dipped in honey and sprigs of mint, not garnish, but offerings to ensure the goddess is pleased. You glance around. The workers are mostly women, heads wrapped in linen, arms deep in fermentation vats. In ancient Mesopotamia, brewing was often a feminine craft, steeped in tradition, ritual, and economic heft. Beer wasn't just beverage, it was sustenance, salary, and sacrament. Workers were paid in beer. Festivals flowed with beer. Taxes could be settled in beer. It was society's frothy backbone. Fringe fact: one brewing method involved singing to the mash during fermentation. The tone and rhythm were believed to encourage yeasts to behave. Historians still argue whether this practice influenced beer quality or just gave brewers something to do between temperature checks. Around you, vessels of various shapes hold different types. Dark barley brews, light wheat infusions, spiced ceremonial ales. Some were poured over statues as libation. Others were sipped before battle. You're handed a goblet with ridged sides, meant for easy grip during spiritual dancing. You're not ready to dance, so you take cautious gulps. The priestess leads you to an altar where tiny goblets are placed like chess pieces. She mutters a chant and dips her fingers into each. This is sacred tasting. You copy her motions. The beer flavors are earthy, smoky, and occasionally so sour your tongue demands reparations. Here in the cradle of civilization, beer isn't a casual indulgence. It's structured, divine, and deeply woven into daily life. You sip again, more respectfully. The goddess watches, or at least the temple cat does. Next, you'll join the brewers behind the curtain, where vats bubble, wages flow, and beer becomes currency.
You slip behind the temple's ceremonial alcove into the brewery proper, a clay-walled workshop, alive with steam, murmurs, and the thick scent of grain mash. Here, beer isn't sacred metaphor, it's sweat and calculation. At the heart of it all are women, brewers, tasters, record keepers, kneeling beside barrels, straining mash through woven sieves, humming softly to track timing. They're not novices, they're masters. In ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia, brewing was often a female-led enterprise. Women ran household breweries, supplied market stalls, and oversaw temple offerings. You watch a brewer carefully stir a vat with a reed paddle the size of a broom. Steam rises, and with it the aroma of barley, dates, and fermented wisdom. You breathe it in and immediately hiccup. She grins. You're clearly new here. The beer is made in stages, soaking barley until it sprouts, drying it in the sun, crushing it into paste, and boiling that with water, date syrup, and whatever spices the brewer swears improves digestion. It bubbles thickly in huge ceramic pots. Nearby, another worker ladles beer into smaller jars lined with wax, a preservation method that reduces spoilage and makes the jars stackable for transport. You peer inside. It's golden brown with sediment like tiny stars. Fun fringe fact: Sumerians used round, stubby jars called kuduru for storing and transporting beer. Some were inscribed with property rights, making your next pint legally binding. Economically, beer was vital. It served as currency, wages paid in pints, contracts sealed with brews. Laborers received rations of beer measured by quality and volume. One scribe's tablet reads, 2 workers, 1 loaf, 1 jar, proving that bread and beer were the standard payout. You toast this transaction with a warm sip, and toast again because the taste takes some convincing. Historians still argue whether early brewing was centralized under temple control or diversified through households. What's clear, beer built communities, powered construction projects, and solved hunger with hydration. You watch a ledger keeper scratch out symbols for quantity, date, and flavor. She adds a small doodle, possibly a frog holding a goblet. You approve. A brewer hands you a tasting straw, hollow, thin, and slightly bent. You sip from a vat labeled Celebration Grade. It's smoother, slightly bubbly with faint fruit notes. You're told this was reserved for festivals, weddings, and government announcements. You nod. It tastes like a civic achievement. You catch a group laughing over a batch that turned sour. They call it goat wine. It's undrinkable, but they'll use it for ritual cleansing. Beer waste rarely wasted. As you step outside, the sun has mellowed. Workers pack clay jars onto carts, women joke with scribes, and a toddler drinks from a shallow cup as a priest chants nearby. Beer here isn't party fuel, it's livelihood, it's backbone. Your breath still smells like barley.
Your hands feel stickier than your conscience. You're ready for one last round where hangovers meet prophecy and pubs echo temples.
You wake to the smell of roasted grain and a distant sound of temple bells. Or is it tavern laughter? It's hard to tell now. The lines between sacred and social blur where beer lives. The ancient brews you tasted were spiritual sustenance. But what about the aftermath? You find yourself at dawn on a mud-slicked street in Thebes, or maybe Memphis, surrounded by groggy brewers and belly-happy priests. A young man sits beside a vat, muttering about last night's great goddess vision, and a woman nearby swears she dreamt of riding a cloud shaped like fermented barley. Hangovers aren't just biological, they're prophetic. The Egyptians called beer Heket, and it was central to celebrations, offerings, wages, and hangouts. They brewed it hic, often with added herbs or dates, and consumed it morning, noon, and sometimes in awkward midnight rituals involving hymns and questionable toasts. Beer was medicine, a mood lifter, and even a fertility symbol. You wander past scribes logging beer rations for pyramid workers, each pint documented with more care than royal marriages. Fringe fact, some brewers used sycamore bark to ferment beer faster. The result, a foamier, slightly bitter brew nicknamed Sky Bubble. It was adored by priests, feared by cats, and rumored to cure sluggishness or cause dancing. Historians still argue whether beer's prevalence stemmed from nutritional necessity or spiritual indulgence. Either way, its legacy sloshed through every part and platter of ancient life. Beer was so entwined with ceremony that breweries operated inside temples, offering libations before brewing. You sip one final cup, warm, spiced, strangely familiar. Around you, workers stir vats, dancers stretch, priests hum through barley songs. And then you wander forward across centuries toward modernity. You pause beside a neon pub sign flashing pale yellow. Inside, the bartender offers you a craft wheat beer with a coriander twist. You taste it, nod slowly. It's crisp, clean, a far cry from Sky Bubble, yet somehow eerily familiar, a loop through time, echoing temple chants and women stirring mash.
The sizzling fritters fade into warm, oil-scented memory. The temples quiet, their stone echoes folding into dream journals long tucked away. Ponies rest in forgotten stables, letters delivered, legends sealed. Your journey tonight through junk food, divine messages, and sacred drinks was textured, absurd, and unexpectedly beautiful. The air now cools. Your thoughts drift like the steam rising from a Sumerian brew. You're not just full of facts, you're full of time. Stories layered like ancient pastries, strange but comforting. Remember the clove bread at the fair, the dream goat in wax tablet glyphs, the eel pops and the bog biscuits? All real, all ridiculous, all part of human invention. Even sleep changes flavor when dream rituals curl around it. You saw crocodile gods, staircases made of vowels, priests who brewed truth. These weren't oddities. They were echoes of people trying to understand life, loss, and laundry. And now it's your turn to sleep. Let your breath steady. Let your body loosen. Maybe you'll dream of a medieval market swirling with candied radishes and prophetic pomegranates. Or maybe your mind will wander backward toward temples lined with barley steam. It's okay. Either way, the past is a soft place to land. Good night, traveler.